Chapter 20. Silence all around her. Anne stood alone in the clearing beyond the wall of briar. It didn't look much different from the rest of the cars. The ground was more solid. It was slightly easier to see the starry night sky through the roof of tree branches. The fog was thinner. The stench of sulphur still hung in the air, but with a touch of something pleasant underneath. Lilacs, maybe? Lavender? But otherwise she didn't notice anything that required a wall of briar to keep people out. The cars within the briar seemed very much the same as the cars outside. Except the trees. The Dreadwillows here were sparse and spread out. They were also much smaller than the mammoth ones that crowded the swamp's outer rim. They weren't quite saplings, but their branches weren't yet laden with the festering black moss that covered the full-grown trees beyond the walled-up grove. They're younger, Anne thought. But that didn't make sense. Surely the trees at the center of the car should be the oldest. Anne scratched her arms. The gray, warty flesh had crawled up to her shoulders. She could feel it slowly inching across her back. "You won't win," she silently promised the cars. The singing was much closer now. The mournful dirge vibrated in her ears. Whenever she heard the song before, it brought relief and calm. Now, hearing it so clearly and so near could hardly contain her excitement. "Hello?" she called out. "Who's there?" No response. The song continued without pause. "I can hear you singing. Please, I want to talk to you." Anne ventured further into the clearing. It didn't seem that far across. She wasn't sure why she couldn't see the singer. Maybe there really were ghosts in the cars. Or maybe the trees are singing, she thought with a laugh. With every step, she felt the heaviness of the cars return until it sat like a stone in her chest. The itch spread. Weary, she leaned against her Dreadwillow to rest. The tree moved. It was ever so slight, but it clearly shifted beneath her hand. Startled, Anne stepped back. The tree's bark rippled across the slender trunk, sliding and rearranging itself. If she looked away, she would have missed it, but the Dreadwillow had definitely moved. They like to be touched. Anne whirled around to face the gentle voice behind her. The woman who stood just at arm's length away looked down at the girl with warm, familiar eyes. Her round face beamed. Though not a queen, she had a regal authority, both wise and welcoming. Mother? For one brief, impossible moment, the Carse's invisible talons, those that had clutched Anne's insides, withered as happiness filled Anne completely. She was about to throw herself into her mother's arms when the woman held her off by raising a hand. "I'm not your mother, Anne," the woman said. "I'm a shade, like almost everything else you've seen in the cars. I'm the piece that she left behind." Left behind? Anne thought about her first trip into the cars for the princess. When she emerged, she felt like she left with less of herself. Did she leave it on purpose? No, but if she knew, I think she'd approve. Anne's hope and joy rushed away like a flood from a broken dam. If possible, she felt even emptier than when she had first entered the cars. "This is cruel," she said. The shade nodded. "I know, I'm sorry." Anne squinted at the woman. "You're not like the other shades. I can see through them, but you look real, and you can talk to me. The other shades you've seen are very old. I haven't been here as long. Over time I'll be as they are. I'll start to fade away, and my words will be unheard, and I'll relive a single event over and over and over until I'm nothing more than a mist of the bog." Anne recalled how the shades of King Isar had repeated their actions, watching the siege of the castle from the balcony, shaking hands with the architect. Why does that happen? The mother shade turned and walked to a nearby Dreadwillow. The pieces people leave behind relive important events, events that change the person forever. For me, that was right in this spot, with this tree. The mother shade reached out, its hand shimmering as it passed through the lowest branch of the Dreadwillow. The tree shuddered. The earth at its base pushed up and out as if a mole were burrowing below. The Dreadwillow's roots pulled the tree away just far enough to be out of the shade's reach. "I thought you said they liked to be touched," Anne said. The mother shade smiled. "Not by shades. By humans, yes. It makes them feel connected. Try it. Don't be afraid." Anne approached the tree and gently placed both palms on its trunk. The branches overhead trembled. The bark swam under her hands, tickling slightly, but the tree didn't retreat as it had when the shade touched it. "This is why you left, isn't it?" Anne asked. "Something happened here, an event you'll relive over and over." The mother shade couldn't take its eyes off the tree. It seemed distant and distracted. "Did she leave? It would have happened long after your mother left me behind here. It was probably for the best." "How can you say that?" Anne said, anger rising. "It hurt when she left. She went knowing I could never show my pain to anyone who would understand." "She left," the mother shade said, turning back slowly, "knowing you would one day come here for answers. I promise it wasn't easy for your mother to leave. Trust that, Anne. It meant so much, having someone to share her sorrow, and it hurt so deeply, knowing the burden you'd bear with or without her. Have you ever wondered why you feel sadness when no one else can? Why the same was true for your mother?" Anne, who still had her hands pressed on the tree, felt it lean into her touch. "I've wondered that every day of my life." The mother shade knelt down, eye to eye with the girl. "It wasn't just the two of you. Every woman in your family has felt the same thing. Most chose to ignore it. They didn't like being different, so they pretended to be happy like everyone else. Others came to the cars. If you search hard enough, you'll find their shades roaming the groves as well, although sometimes they stayed too long and paid the price." She means Pyrrhop and Tally, Anne thought. So the ants really were her distant relatives. They weren't just a fable. The mother shade sighed. "And a few, a very small number, did what your mother did and left the monarchy, but not before they made it here, to the heart of the cars." "But what did they see?" Anne asked. "What did you learn that was so terrible it made you leave me?" For the first time the mother shade seemed unable to speak. It stared off into a space as if the darkness held the words it so desperately needed. "I want you to think about your mother, Anne. Really think about her. She told you many secrets, but she didn't tell you everything. She had one secret she couldn't explain, because she didn't understand it herself. The sadness that travels through our family's women affects everyone differently. Your mother, I, felt it more deeply. It was more than just a sorrow. It took control of me. Of all the lost secret words I knew, there were none that was happening inside of me. There were days, oh, those awful days, when I felt like drowning and choking and falling all at once. You must remember times when I acted strangely." At first Anne thought the shade was lying. She remembered her mother just fine, a kind woman, a gentlewoman, loved and admired by all, none more than by Anne and her father. But when Anne pressed back those memories, there were times when her mother remained in bed all day. Anne's father had blamed the flu, but Anne could remember hearing her mother crying softly behind the bedroom door. Yes, there were days when the sadness seemed stronger, when mother couldn't care for herself, or father, or Anne. How could I have known? Anne wondered. I should have helped her. I should have. The mother shade smiled. You're not to blame, Anne. Don't ever think that. Your mother left because of what she saw here in the heart of the Carse. Her despair kept her from understanding she could take you too. Anne pushed the back of her hand across her cheeks, fending off the unwanted tears. There was much, it seemed, that she didn't understand about how deep her mother's sadness ran. She couldn't imagine that kind of sorrow, but she could see it was real. So she knew why her mother had left her behind. One razor-edged question remained unanswered. Tell me, what did she see? What made her want to leave the monarchy? The dreadwillow shifted under her hands again. Anne looked up to find the trunk of the tree had turned nearly all the way around. She was now staring into 3 misshapen knotholes in the center of the trunk. 2 of the knotholes, side by side, narrowed as she watched. The third, just below the 2, curved slightly with its ends pointing upward, almost like a smile. In all, it looked just like a face. Gasping, Anne stepped back. She looked around quickly and discovered that all the dreadwillows had turned toward her. All, to some degree or another, had faces. Some were made from knotholes, others from dark shades of bark. Every single one was twisted with agony. Anne stumbled. When she backed into a dreadwillow, she spun around. It was very young. Branches had only just started to sprout from the top of the trunk, but the branches weren't the same dark gray color as the bark, as the roots of the tree. They were paler, pinkish beige. They looked like flesh. The trees are people? Anne said, horrified. People who wandered into the cars? The mother shape appeared at her side. No one enters the cars of their own will. You know that. Then, these are my ancestors? The ones who came to the cars for relief? You've met Parrot and Tally, the mother shade said. You know what happened to those unlucky few. Who are they, then? Anne pulled her hand across the face of the tree before her, as though brushing someone's cheek. The tree shuddered, and Anne understood it was grateful for her touch. Anne once again heard the dirge, the sad, haunting waltz that had never stopped, but its presence had faded while she spoke with the shade. Anne held out her lantern, searching for the source. The mother shade had vanished. Anne was about to call out for her when, just ahead, she spotted two silhouettes kneeling at the base of a dreadwillow. You! She cried out, reaching across the clearing. But once she got close enough for her light to illuminate the pair, she froze in place. The duo, their faces hidden by crimson hoods, tended to the tree before them. One pulled weeds from the near dreadwillow's roots, while the others poured murky water from the rusty pail onto the base of the tree. Her eyes ran up the dreadwillow's trunk. Sure enough, the bark higher up was mottled. The color faded from dark gray to the pinkish beige. This dreadwillow was so young it hadn't sprouted any branches at all. On one side of the trunk an arm, still very human, hung limply. On the other side the arm had begun turning into a branch, fingers replaced with twigs, skin replaced with wood, and in the center of the trunk a face made of bark and flesh stared back, a look of horror permanently etched across its features. It was the face of Anne's father. That is the end of chapter 20.